All right. Let's start. So I'll start by introducing our lovely speaker. Hello everyone, and welcome to ATypI All Over. The next presentation is titled CJK Typefaces, Friendly Neighbors Far, Far Away by Ye-Jin B. Ye-Jin is a type designer at Sandal Inc. She has successfully led the technical improvements of Hangul font development process at Sandal. We participated in Noto Serif Korean with old and modern Hangul production and also designed Greta San's Hangul. We is passionate about designing East Asian typefaces, working with people from various backgrounds, and caring for her bonsai. Welcome, Ye-Jin. I'll play your presentation now.
Hi guys, I'm Ye-Jin, and I'm a type designer at Sandor. Sandor is 36 years old type foundry in South Korea, and I drew Hangul, which is a Korean alphabet, and I also drew Hanja. Well, Hanja means ideographic characters that are used in Korea. Well, these ideographs have been used not only in Korea, they were derived from ancient China and have been used in so-called East Asian cultural sphere. And those ideographs used in Chinese language using area are called Hanzi, while those used in Japan are called Kanji. Those ideographs may look similar to you, but are actually different in their forms, traditions, and the usage in each region. And in this video, I would use the term CJK characters, which collectively refers to the writing systems used in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean languages. The term CJK characters contains Hanzi, Kanji, Hanja, and other scripts like Kana and Hangul. These days, my job is about creating CJK fonts and collaborating with designers from this CJK area. And what happened in the collaboration, what I've learned in the collaboration, and what can happen in the near future in the collaboration are the topic I'm going to talk about. It's mostly about tiny little inconveniences in communication and also a bunch of small questions. Well, earlier this year, I was talking to my Taiwanese colleague about the design of the new project that we were working on. And the project was that Sandor makes a Hangul font and he makes traditional Chinese for it. Our topic was specifically about the design issue of the average size of the central inner space of the ideographic character in a square box. And we were talking in English. And this concept of the average size of the central inner space of the ideographic character in a square box is a very important idea in designing CJK characters. For your understanding, I've brought some extra explanation and some also metaphor for it. So this square box here is Samyeon in Korean, and Samyeon defines the standard character size of the CJK font. And this bounding box is like the baseline in Latin alphabet type design, and this square is where CJK characters are drawn. Well, Samyeon is an idea shared among ideography using areas, so it has many names. In Japanese, it's called Jizura, and in Chinese, it's called Simian. In Adobe Apps and Microsoft's OpenType Tech Registry, it was named like ICF, Ideographic Character Face, which is a cool name, I think. And some digital font tools also support this. For example, in the Glyphs app, a custom feature called CJK Guide helps setting up the guideline for it. Where here comes the awesome metaphor. Let's suppose there's gravity that affects the shape of a letter, and that gravity occurs at the center of Samyeon. When the gravity is weak, then the strokes will be evenly, peacefully spread on the space, filling the edge of the Samyeon. However, when the gravity gets strong, then all strokes on a space will be shrink tightly to the center and will be stuck together. Then the center inner space gets smaller. And in the center, the distance between elements of the characters gets closer to each other, while the edges, the space is relatively empty. And the force that gravity affects how white space in the square divided. In other words, it affects the average size of the central inner space of the character in Tamyeon. Well, in Korean, we've been calling that average size of central inner space like pum. Pum refers to the size of the central inner space related to the virtual force that pulls all strokes to the center. I believe it's almost same as Japanese type design term, futokoro. And we've used the word pum like this hanja has small pum, or this hanja has larger pum. And this word pum was not only about it's not only about ideographs design. We use this also in Hangul design. So we say like this Hangul has small pum, or this Hangul has larger pum. So anyway, earlier this year, I was talking to my Taiwanese colleague about that central inner space. It was the very first meeting of the collaboration, so I'd like to tell him that this font's pum shouldn't be small or tight, that this font will make, it will have slightly big pum. But as he wasn't Korean and he doesn't speak Korean, at first I thought I should mention that central inner space as just central inner space in English, but central inner space didn't feel accurate. I mean, even though the conversation worked without the word pum, it felt like the word central inner space doesn't seem to imply that these central gravitational field affecting the entire square box from center to the edge. For example, when you see these two glyphs, left one has quite evenly divided white space, and the right one has extreme proportion, I'd say. In this case, the left one has small pum and the right one has big pum. Small pum means there's a strong central force, and the glyphs is dense inside and empty outside. Therefore, it has some old and handwritten style. But you know that the central inner space, that word, it feels a bit plain, I thought, and it feels like the word doesn't directly refers to all these things. So I asked him if he knows the word pum or the Japanese word futokoro, because those two are what I knew. And yes, it turned out that both of us knew that the Japanese word futokoro for that space. So we began to call that inner space futokoro from then. He told me later that he knew this Chinese term for that space. It's a calligraphic term meaning the central space of 9 equally divided squares. He also mentioned that this word may not perfectly same as the concept of pum, but at least it's a similar one. So I knew that designers working in CJK areas share a list of ideas and a list of vocabularies for type design. And I mean, Korean designers know Korean terms, Chinese designers know Chinese terms, and Japanese designers know Japanese terms for the common ideas shared in ideographs using area. And I found it interesting that we have these common thoughts but do not know exactly how others call it, and that non-existence of agreed translation or an agreed terminology indeed brought some small tiny inconveniences in conversations during the cooperation. So I thought before we make CJK fonts together, we should get to know each other's terminology. And by understanding how others name the ideas differently, perhaps we could see how close we were and how far away we've been, and how to harmonize those differences to make a good CJK fonts together. So months ago, we had opened a list of common ideas in CJK type design. It's about terminology. And the purpose of this list was to check our vocabularies so that we can achieve successful co-working. So this was not about creating logically organized, perfect grammar structure. It was more about collecting words in practical situations in work. So we have asked each other, like I and my Korean colleagues, Taiwanese colleagues, and Japanese colleagues, and we also got some help from Wikipedia and these awesome books. There we start from Tamyeon, Jisura, Simian, and there's Pum, Futokoro, and all other tiny small words that we use and we need when talking about CJK character design. And there are some interesting cells like the structure of ideographs. It seems that Korean, Japanese, and Chinese all have different point of view on the structure of ideographs. Or the words about this element was also very interesting and quite cute, I think. In Chinese word, it means a neck of a goose, while Korean word, it means a hook. Well, it seems that for some of these terms, Japanese has a bit more sophisticated languages, and it also seems that we may have some differences in the efficiency of word. And for this one, we've been still looking for a proper word for this part. It's a drawing skill to control the thickness of a stroke without anyone noticing. And my team has always been calling this part just this and that, but I think perhaps we could create a new name for that. And if you are interested in this list, please contact us so that we can share the link of this page with you. They are not completed yet, and we are still working on it. And I think they have some mysteries and some odd jargons for it's from real work. And it turned out that some of the words that I thought CJK designers share were not actually shared. And some of them were just newly made since we couldn't find a new replacement in our languages. For example, we have a Korean word here, 극대종획. It was newly made like 2 years ago by Sandor's director. And it means the thickest vertical stroke in a character. This word is about kind of design technique, focusing on maintaining the gray level in complex ideograph characters. In ideograph design, the value of the thickest stroke of the character would be roughly determined by the number of vertical strokes in the letter contains. So a designer should know which stroke should be the thickest one. In most cases, the most thickest one is the right bottom stroke, but it depends on cases. And the designer should know the value of the thickest stroke of one-stroke character, three-stroke character, four-stroke character, and complex characters. And by setting and aligning those values, you can maintain the grade level of the thousands of characters. But as Hangul is relatively less complex than ideographs, I think among Hangul designers, knowing the thickest strokes value wasn't that important. However, as we started working with kanji and hanzi makers and started drawing ideographic characters for Korean fonts, we needed a Korean term for this idea. So our Japanese colleague suggested to create a new word, and my boss, Director Sim, created a new word here by combining 4 commonly used hanja. And my Taiwanese colleague improved it to more Cantonese word. One more example that CJK designers do not share. I think this term is now only used in Korea. I mentioned that the gravity from the center of the square, But let's assume that this gravity occurs at the top of the square, not at the center of the square. Then all elements will be aligned at the top of the square, right? For example, in this font, the center of gravity stays in the middle, while in this font, the center of gravity goes up. In Hangul design in Korea, a font that has top-aligned center of gravity is not uncommon these days. But interestingly, I and my team haven't found a good Japanese or Chinese translation or a replacement for it. So if you are a designer working in CJK areas and know about the terminology about this top-aligned center of gravity in Japanese or Chinese, please let us know. And this non-existence of agreed terminology raises some questions, I think, like, can we say that the location of the center of gravity should match in one font family? In other words, when Hangul center of gravity goes up, should ideograph center of gravity follow? It's like, what should we consider and what should not be considered when matching Hangul and ideographic characters, when making Hangul and ideographic character fonts as a family? Which of those should be developed into similarities and which should remain as differences? Or is it better just not to consider it at all? These questions are worth asking, I think, and this was the questions we found by knowing the terminology. And there are so many things that I haven't mentioned or we haven't found. Well, this printout here is the very first draft of this presentation. I wrote this like 3 days ago. I wrote that draft in Korean, my first language, with Hangul characters and a few Hanja characters. And in this paragraph, I found something interesting. You can see the line gap has changed a little bit here. I think many of you must be already familiar with this kind of situation. So when the fonts you're using do not support specific glyph that you wrote, then the system automatically replace the missing glyphs to some other font that support that missing glyph, so that you just do not realize they are missing. But as an unintended side effect of this automatic change, you'll have a paragraph with uneven line gaps. I realized immediately and thought, oh, it must be Hanja. Since many Korean fonts these days do not support Hanja, it was a reasonable guess. So I checked the font's name. The font I was using was Apple SD 삼돌고디. And what's more interesting here is that, as far as I know, this font actually supports Hanja. Well, here's what really happened. At here, you can see that one ideograph is very slightly bigger and thinner than Hanja. Well, that is not Hanja. That's kanji, the Japanese ideograph, and the font is Hiragino. It seems that what my OS replaced was kanji because it didn't have a font that supports Hanja and kanji both. So here we have two different fonts and unintended line gap change. I'm not showing you this printout to complain about them. Actually, at first, I didn't feel that uncomfortable with these things because this kind of situation very commonly happens when writing a paragraph containing CJK characters. In Korea, these days, only a very few Hangul fonts include Hanja. And yes, kanji and hanji haven't been the first consideration for type foundries in Korea, nor the second or the third for the past decades. And I think that this tiny annoying inconvenience that many of us seem to have already used to is something worth getting interested in. And this is something that CJK designers can improve by developing more CJK font family by working together. It may look very small and perhaps insignificant, but isn't our job is about creating something very tiny, small changes? Of course, we have Noto Sans and Serif, the best option for CJK paragraphs. Many editors and designers who are friends of mine truly appreciate that font, and I also do. But I think that perhaps we can just start another one someday. If you are interested in the list of CJK design terminology, or if you have any answers to the questions I asked in this video, or if you want to cooperate with Sandur in any kind of way, please contact here. And thank you all to my friends and colleagues who are working with me right now and making small things happen and getting to know each other. Thank you so much for watching this video. Bye. That's kanji, the Japanese ideograph, and the font is Hiragino. It seems that what my OS replaced was kanji because it didn't have a font that supports Hanja and kanji.
Hello. Ye-Jin, do you want to switch on your video? Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for the great presentation. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I just want to share with everybody who's watching that Ye-Jin has generously shared a list of the CJK design terminology that they use internally on the general channel of the ATypI 2020 Slack just before this presentation. So anybody who wants can look at, can find it there. Everybody's saying that they missed the last part of the video. There is some little hiccup that happens sometimes where the video begins a bit late and then ends a little soon. Unfortunately, it is something that's weird to the platform. And maybe if you rerun it later on, you can maybe watch, you'll probably be able to watch the last part. I know it's irritating, but we are trying to fix it. Anyway, does anybody have any questions for Ye-Jin? Congratulations, by the way, on the release of Greta San's Hangul. It looks great.
Thank you so much.
I had two questions. So I don't know about you, but when I am out and about with family and I see interesting letters and then I start describing them to people that don't really are not as interested in letters as I am. Do you get weird looks when you call something a hook or a goose's neck? Like when you're trying to admire letters?
You mean I use words when I'd like to admire those letters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're with non-type designers, like you're with just your friends who are not type designers. What is their reaction?
무슨 말이지? 무슨 말이지? Could you say it again?
So let's say you're going out at night with a few friends, and then you see a signboard, or you see a place where there are interesting letters, and you start describing them with this terminology, and they're looking at you weirdly. Does that happen to you often?
Yeah, that happens very often. I think that happens very often to every typeface designers, I guess. Yeah, I try to explain that why that font is interesting or why that's fascinating, but yeah, only typeface designers friends understand my words, and yeah, that's what always.
Yeah. And then the second question was, I see that in a lot of instances, all of these specific bits of typefaces have different terminologies for different languages. While some may borrow terminology from other languages, some are quite different. So how do you come to a consensus amongst the three of you that, okay, for Korean, we are going to call it this, for Japanese, we're going to call it this, and for Chinese, we're going to call it this?
Actually, I intended to make a consensus about some specific terminology, and it's more about just collecting actual words that we use in work, because that list was not about some academically sophisticated. It's more about our vocabulary list that we could use in work, actual work. So yeah, it's a bit, I would say it's not very sophisticated.
No, it's not about the sophistication. I find it very interesting that you maintain the origin of the terminology for the different languages and there is no homogenization. I think that is great because that means that it has meaning in every different culture. It has cultural significance and cultural meaning. But it does, for sometimes, let's say if you've already chosen a term in Korean and then your Japanese colleague comes to you and comes with this term, do you sometimes say, okay, maybe the Korean translation of this may work better, or the other way around? Does that happen?
Yes, I think those things happen when we have a conversation about design, but I'm more like trying to use the word for my colleague's own language when I try to make a conversation with him about the design. Yeah. So it's about understanding each other's languages, I think, more like finding a one better option for terminology. Yeah, I think that's what we are doing right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And have you found a way to measure if there is a change in the efficiency with which you work before you had this set of terminology? So is there kind of an increase in speed that you've noticed when you kind of are commenting on each other's work?
So you just
Should I just ask me again? It's fine. If you can't hear me, I'll just repeat it. Doesn't matter. No problem.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't understand what you mean.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So I'm guessing that the reason you built this terminology is so that you can efficiently have a conversation with colleagues.
Yeah.
Have you been able to measure the impact of having the vocabulary? Like, what is the improvement in time, or like, does it make collaboration faster?
I think that this list of vocabularies make collaboration much not only faster but also more accurate, I think, and that's the good part of this vocabulary list. I think we can communicate more accurately with each other by knowing each other's languages and terminologies and vocabularies.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds like an amazing collaborative tool. And I wish we had something like this for Indic languages, for the South Asian languages, where when we collaborate, we can kind of discuss in a similar way. Because unfortunately, we, for the most part, borrow Latin terminology, even when in some cases it may not make sense. So I'm going to be taking the initiative after this talk to kind of figure out some common terminology, and maybe we can then have a large Pan-Asian terminology spreadsheet.
First, that's a great idea.
Awesome. All right. Ken says in the chat, your last example about font fallback involved U67A0, which is mainly a Japanese ideograph, but also included in HKSCS Hong Kong SAR.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions, or should we move to the Hangout space and then Ye-Jin can maybe take questions one-on-one? All right. I think there are no more questions, so I'm going to say thank you again. And congratulations again on the release of Greta-san's Hangul. I look forward to looking through the spreadsheet and find things that are common between South Indian with South Asian writing systems and CJK, and maybe I can start sending you an email about it at some point. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, Hyewon asks, can we see the last part of the video? I think if you wait for the session to end in about 27 minutes and then re-click on it to view broadcast, you'll be able to see it. That's unfortunately the only way to see it because during the live thing, it's a little bit, it's uncontrollable. But if, please ask any more questions about this on the Slack and we are happy to answer. All right. So if you're posting on social media, please consider using the hashtags ATypI 2020, ATypI all over, and also tag us on Twitter at ATypI or on Instagram at ATypI_org. Have a great morning, everybody. Great morning, afternoon, evening, and I'll see you around. Bye. Thank you again.
Bye.